Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right, awesome. So today, we're going to be diving into something that I think we can probably all relate to, at least a little bit,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is this whole idea of comparison. And, kind of going from that feeling of comparison to something a little more positive like compassion.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And we're going to be looking at this text called From Comparison to Compassion, Supporting Yourself and Others.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, just the title alone, I think, is really interesting. Just the way that they put those two things together,
Yeah.
right? Comparison to compassion.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I really liked about this text is just how it, kind of breaks down those two ideas.
Yeah.
Because, I think we often think of comparison as being something that's negative, but it can also be, a really good thing. Like, it can kind of push us to be better.
Right. It can motivate us. Like there's that whole saying, comparison is the thief of joy. But then on the other hand, I can definitely see how it can kind of push us to grow, to strive for better things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do we navigate that? Like how do we decide when is it a good thing and when does it become something that's not so helpful?
Yeah, and where does envy fit into all of this?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, because envy is where it can get a little tricky. Unlike I guess, healthy comparison, envy often leads to resentment and just like a lot of self-doubt. And it's really rooted in this sense of lack.
Yeah.
We focus on what we don't have instead of really appreciating all of the good things that we do have.
It's so true. And gosh, I feel like social media is like a breeding ground for that.
Huh.
It's like suddenly everybody's, vacation is more exotic or their careers are just skyrocketing. And it's so easy to just fall into that trap of comparison.
Oh, it is. And what's really interesting is that this text actually like digs into the psychology of, why we do that,
Yeah.
why we compare. And it turns out it's not just social media, it's actually how we're wired.
Really?
Yeah, like from an evolutionary perspective, comparison was actually really important for survival. It helped us to kind of assess where we stood within a group and, make sure that we were safe. But of course, now in modern times, it's amplified like 100 times over.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, we're kind of stuck with this primal instinct, right?
Right.
But we have to figure out how to manage it.
Exactly.
So speaking of managing it, the text talks about this whole idea of shifting from envy to empathy. So how do we actually do that? Like, how do we make that shift in a practical way?
Well, the first step is really awareness. You've got to notice when you're feeling envious and then kind of try to understand what's triggering it.
Mm.
Instead of just trying to push those feelings down, which we all do, there are actually like mindfulness techniques that you can use to process it in a healthier way. Have you heard of the RAIN method?
Rain method. No.
So it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And it basically helps you to kind of move through those difficult emotions without judgment.
I like that. Especially the investigate part. It's like really taking the time to figure out what's at the root of it. Is it a specific person's success that's bothering you? Is it something deeper, like an insecurity that you haven't really addressed?
Exactly. That's the key. By exploring the root of that envy, we can actually start to dismantle it. And then the nurture part is where you offer yourself some self-compassion, just reminding yourself that you are worthy and enough, regardless of what's happening around you. Right.
Because, I was going to say, it seems like this is where the whole supporting yourself part of the title comes in.
Yeah.
Because, you can't really be there for other people if you're constantly, fighting this battle within yourself, right?
Absolutely. When we're caught up in envy, it's like all of our energy is focused inward. But, by working on that self-compassion and addressing those insecurities, it actually frees up space for us to connect with other people and to really be there for them.
So let's talk a bit more about that supporting others part.
Mhm.
How does that, tie into this whole thing with managing envy?
Well, think about it. When we're, super envious of someone, we tend to see them as, a threat
Right.
or like competition.
Right.
But when we work on empathy, our perspective really shifts. We start to see their struggles, their joys, their humanity.
So instead of comparing ourselves to them, we're actually trying to understand their experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And I imagine that makes us much more supportive as friends, partners, colleagues, across the board.
Absolutely. And, the text actually gives some really great examples of this. One that really stuck with me was about this woman who was struggling with career envy. And, instead of just letting that resentment fester, she actually reached out to the person that she envied. but not to compete with them or anything, just to learn from them.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like totally turning envy on its head.
It is.
And, it really highlights this ripple effect of compassion because by choosing empathy over envy, we're not only changing our own experience, but we're also helping to create a more supportive and understanding environment for everyone around us.
That's a great point. So I guess to kind of sum it all up for our listeners, comparison is definitely a natural part of being human,
Absolutely.
but we don't have to let envy run the show.
Right.
By, cultivating that self-compassion and practicing empathy, we can actually turn those feelings into something really powerful.
Absolutely. And on that note, just as a final thought to leave you with, I would encourage all of you listening to think about one small act of compassion that you can offer today, either to yourself or to someone else. You might be surprised at the positive impact that it can have.
Great advice.
Yeah.
And that's our deep dive for today. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.